Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Immortal Great Souls. Book 2, The Rascor Plains, chapters 48 through 50. In these chapters, it turns out it's been 2 years. Scorio was in a coffin, locked underground, immobile, for 2 years. I can't even fathom. I really can't. Like, my brain, it boggles. Also, allegedly, his friends are dead. I don't believe it. I won't believe it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode, but also, I hate you, and no thank you. This is so mean-spirited. Phil, what are you doing? Why are you like this? 2 years, sir? Is this One Piece? What are we doing? I never thought. I really kind of expected that once he got out, we'd find out less time had passed than he thought. And to find out that it was even more it's so upsetting. The whole function of everything is thrown off. And when I say that, I mean just the fundamentals of the way that everything works is different now, because different people are in power and different people have made moves, and Praximar has to die now. I always wanted him dead because I do not like him. Setting aside any of the things that he has done to Scorio specifically, he is a bad man, objectively. But now, finding out the way that he went after the uprising leaders, it just feels spiteful and petty. And he's the sort of person that I'm like, death is almost too good. Like, maybe if we could find a way to imprison him, except doing that makes it feel more like, well, we're just setting it up so that he can escape at some point and be a threat again. And I don't want that, but I also do feel sometimes that death is too easy for some people, you know? So that's where I'm feeling. Dan says, as I said last week, you are going to be mad, but not for the reasons you thought. Yeah. You know what? We're going to go ahead and back up. Starting at 48, Scorio is surrounded by these dying grubs, and he is now a flame vault. And it is really funny to me because, when he got tossed down here, I figured in the outside of my brain, I bet somehow this winds up working to his advantage, that he becomes even more badass because he's close to this gold that he can't utilize, but he'll find a way. I figured this is the way these stories go. This is not a criticism. I don't like it when it's sort of like, I don't want to be able to predict anything that's going to happen. Sometimes being surprised is super fun, and I love it because it happens so rarely. But if you're just trying to twist shit up in such a way that you're always surprising your reader, then it's just straight up not going to make any sense. So all that said, it's kind of fun that the way that this is working, and I'm going to make another Cradle reference here. It's a really different, so in Cradle, I'm going to do some spoilers for the Cradle series, you guys. There is a book called Ghostwater, and Lyndon kind of winds up locked somewhere, and he gets some big advantages from where he's trapped. because of some stuff that was overlooked by a lot of people or they weren't allowed access to or whatever. And while I enjoy the Ghostwater book a lot because there is so much advantage in it that he gets so much of a jump start after feeling like he has been held back for so long in the previous books, I won't lie, it did feel a little easy. Like, even with being trapped and struggling and all of it, it still did feel a little bit like, oh, it was just sitting there. It was just waiting for him, a magical potion. Really? I still enjoyed it, but I find this a lot more satisfying. That it's like, here's the thing that was going to kill me, and I had to find a way to process it in a manner that it would keep it from killing me, which I think is a lot more, as I said in the previous chapters, about like critical thinking and problem solving as well as just ability. And so all of that leads him to sort of a similar place. Lyndon, it's not like he has leveled up to such a high level at that point. It's more that the level that he has reached, considering that everything about the quality of his body and his mana and all of that is a lot more advanced than it should be for his level. And that's sort of where we're at now with Scorio, with being tempered in gold and just sheer physical training as well, because he got brought to like the peak of fitness and then locked there, which is very lucky for him in a way. And I say lucky with a big asterisk, obviously, but like, he has come out of this with this tempered body, a repaired heart that is super efficient, and a like the whole energy of him has shifted such that his aura is low key alone a threat. And I am very into it. There, Dan says this is a Xianxia trope. I hope I'm saying that right. I always feel like I'm saying it wrong. A special body tempering for the hero, which is what, yeah, Lyndon has this with the viper venom, I think. He asks for so much of it that he very nearly dies. And that's probably more accurate to like what is going on here than Ghostwater, but I digress. So this just felt really, really earned. And I just felt, I just want to say, if you are listening, I really respect how much you made me feel the time passing and made me feel that Scorio earned all of this without it being boring or feeling tedious, because that's so tricky. Um, so this dude, he summons his shroud. It appeared before him, inches thick and curving in a great hemisphere 3 yards in diameter. Superficially, it appeared the same, but it was concrete now, more resilient, enhanced by the nauseous infinity of practice he'd subjected it to while trapped in Idriel's coffin. I really like Idriel's coffin, by the way, as just like maybe a book title, a band name would also work. You know, it could be the name of some, maybe like a venue. Yeah, we're playing at Idriel's Coffin tonight. We have a gig. I just feel like it really rolls, and you should do something with that. So, okay. This is when he manifests his newest form and his wings. Bruh is a straight up demon. And I, for one, applaud this transformation. I'm so excited that he is able to fly. The way that he just yells, hell yes, is so great, because I just think sometimes when a person demonstrates wild abilities in books or in movies and TV, they just don't quite have the reaction. That it's all wonder, which is great, but can we just have a moment of just like, oh, fuck yes, amazing. Like, just some real deep satisfaction in this way a little bit more because I feel like that's where I would land probably. Um, so yeah, this is just the best. And when he is trying to like see him and he's just spinning around like a dog chasing his tail, it is very, very funny. Scorio let out a second whoop and twisted about again, only to bang one wing into the wall and send a shiver of pain and strangeness down its length, like when he accidentally banged his elbow in precisely the wrong manner. Ow, sorry. I mean, I love that he said sorry to himself. Y'all, if I haven't done this a billion times, oh my God. Also, the fact that it, like, his wings have a sensitivity to them. Listen, this is a little taste of Akatar. Those of you who are into A Court of Thorns and Roses are going to know what I'm referencing here, but there is a sensitivity to those wings that can be brought up in a way in certain scenes that is gratifying to all parties. So anyway, he he is practicing getting his wings, and he's looking up and like, you know what? Maybe I can use this. And I was trying to figure this out because you guys know that I had said last time I thought he could just grab one of those like crystals, but maybe that's not, and it turns out that really they're still too high above his head. That was part of the reason. He can't reach them. They don't dip all the way down. Because the way they're described at first initially, I think he uses the word buckets. So I'm imagining them dipping into the gold, like picking up water, but they don't have to do that. It's all the ambiance of it is enough for them to get like charged. So yeah, he flies up, um and let's see, he found by simply flapping his wings faster, he could maintain a smoother trajectory. It was surreal, glorious, magnificent to feel the huge muscles that ran down his back and wrapped around his chest as a second, larger set of pectorals propelling him forward. I really wonder if this is something that would have been as easy for him to manage if he weren't in such amazing physical shape. Because to bring it back again to Court of Thorns and Roses, there is a character who can manifest wings, but they are not native. And this person finds out quite quickly the kinds of core strength that you need. And they have to work on their just regular old physical fitness in order to be able to use the wings adequately. And he just happens to be at peak conditioning. Um, so he's getting a little carried away with the curse, it's kind of delightful. I know the curse is a genuine problem, but when it's just sort of like manifesting as like drunk with joy, it's hard for me to be that concerned about it. There's a fly that literally just landed on my face during my recording. That is insanely rude. Fly, please have some fucking dignity. Let me have mine. Um, so that's when it truly hit home. His ignition techniques were now theoretically endless for as long as there was mana in the air. And his heart, its spherical perfection, made it so that he vented nothing. All was perfectly burned in service to his power. The conversion ratio of mana to power output was unlike anything he'd ever seen. And his reservoir, it was as dense as before, the hallmark of his having made Tombspark. But even in that enhanced state, it was now vastly increased in size by his heart's expansion. Awe filled Scorio as he watched his own system maintain itself. Gold mana flowed into his heart, was split, fed his ignition, and altered form, unceasing and requiring little by way of concentration on his part. And this kind of made me jealous, to be honest, because I have talked before about the difficulties with me. Like, I'm working with a trainer now to try and get back in shape. I'm turning 40 next week, and it has really started to hit me that if I don't get it together, it's going to be bad. So I have been trying to sort of like feel the small victories. I'm not weighing myself. I am trying to focus on my actual performance and certain exercises and things that I'm able to do more easily. And those are adding up and they are real. However, it would be so cool if you could like look internally and see, oh, my heart rate, like or the plaque, for example, because I was eating too much saturated fat, that has begun to clear up in my heart because I've improved my diet. It would be so cool to be able to see, like, oh, I can tell that my muscles have torn from that exercise and have grown when they repaired themselves. Like, the being able to actually visibly see the changes in your body due to your work being put in would be so nice, as far as like somebody who wants a little bit of instant gratification. Just sometimes we just, it just helps. So I just had a moment of like, God, that would be so cool. Um, so he realizes he can escape, and he is just like, what am I going to do? Because I can't just go up there like a fucking idiot. They will take me out again. And he knows that what he wants more than anything is vengeance, which unfortunately, I don't think is a sustainable motivator for a person, but it really does feel like once he finds out, so to speak, because I don't believe it, that his friends are dead, he's sort of in this place where it's like, well, then who cares? I'll get my vengeance and maybe I'll die, but they're dead, so whatever. Like, it's not of concern to him. And this is a place for a person mentally to be that is so dangerous and so potentially destructive to so many people, which he does turn out to be quite destructive to a number of people, as we see later. But he has another moment of just, I gotta go to the Fiery Shoals and I gotta keep a low profile and find some things out. And this is when he's thinking, how long have I been down here? Several months, easily, 5 or 6. And then when he finds out it's been 2 years, he's truly just fucking like shaken. Um, so he'd have to be careful. Emotions roiled through him. It wasn't that he wished for a second to stay down here a moment longer, but rather, no. He'd made mistakes, and now he would rectify them and provide restitution. But most importantly, he would learn from all this. Never again would he blindly trust anybody who said they had his interests at heart. This really feels like he's turning a corner and becoming a lot more like Naomi. And I am very curious, if she is indeed still alive, like I think, how she's going to react to this, because she has wanted him allegedly to be more suspicious for a while. But it's one thing to think you wish somebody were smarter, and it's another thing for a defining feature of theirs to be fundamentally changed. So I think part of what she liked about him was his willingness to trust to a point, even though it frustrated her. And what will it be like now that he has lost that? He may even be more suspicious than she is. Um, so, oh my God. Sorry guys, in the chat, Dan used the word trauma, but left off the A and just put traum. And Ms. T says, traum is my new vocab, but breathe. And I really can't help but laugh. I found out like a few months ago that the Zennials are calling a mental breakdown a little menti bee. And I could not handle it. It took me a minute to recover from hearing this cute little pet name for mental breakdown. 'Cause this is the world we live in now, where our mental health is all so fucking fractured that we're coming up with like slang for it. Like, Jesus Christ. Oh, God. So he flies up and he does do the thing where he's like up past the buckets. Um, he sank his talons in the inside of the shaft just before he began to fall. His talons bit deep into the rock and took his weight, and then he begins to climb. So, I'm gonna kind of like jump through some of this because I'm already like 20 minutes into this and I haven't even gotten to the part where he is out of the cavern yet. So the first thing he starts to do is plan who he's going to talk to first. Moira is the one that he zeroes in on and is like the the somebody, let's see. Uh a grating appeared in the gloom above. Scorio paused to consider. How had it not arrested his fall when he'd been tossed down? The answer was obvious. Somebody had opened it. Who could have known? The answer was obvious. Moira. He clawed his way closer. After a few moments' consideration, he worked his way around the shaft to the rising segment, timed his move carefully, and reached out to take hold of the chain on which the buckets were affixed. So, this is as he, starts to come up. He's like, how am I going to do this? And he basically like slips in and steals a uniform in like classic fashion, which I am very for. And the whole like the way that he is able to use his command to make people do things. I am so curious because we haven't been in anybody's POV who has been on the receiving end of this. And in this case, it's a different situation than when he is in a fight because he's in the next room to some people that he basically commands to leave. And I don't know, do they feel something is wrong with their reason for walking out of the room? Like they get up and leave probably without really thinking about it. Do they stop and consider once they're out of the room, why am I out here again? And even if you do, as somebody with ADHD, I'll frequently do that. I'll just leave a room because I meant to go do something and then I will lose track of what it was I had intended to go do. So even if you do have a moment of like, wait, why'd I do that? It may not even be enough to realize somebody manipulated you. But I'm just so curious what it feels like on their end and how much suspicion could be raised through that, or if it genuinely feels like you are making the decision yourself, that it's not from some sort of external influence. Um, so, uh, he, he finds this key after he tells these guys to leave. Scorio pulled the door open and slipped into the hallway. The hallway was empty. And there's this stairwell, only to emerge into familiar territory, the mineral humid tang of the hot baths. He had to be on the third floor down now, the lowest he and his friends had been allowed to visit. There'd be more people here, but he'd be less likely to be noticed for being where he didn't belong. Confidence. And this is frequently, a thing, especially in shows where people are doing heists or cons. It's just like how you carry yourself when you go in. However, it's not that simple. Now that he has this bonkers aura, it's just a really different animal. And it's like there's evidently a way to tamp down the overall vibes that he is sending out without intending to, but he does not yet know how to do that. Um, so, uh, he basically just using his little, like, I've got this uniform on and I'm going to do this pretending to be one of the people thing. He just decides to fall in with like the staff, the catering staff, and he becomes a dishwasher. All it takes is standing in the right place and somebody tells him to do stuff and he does it. And it's the kind of thing that, like, I believe if I were not familiar with working in these sorts of environments, I would be sort of like, nobody notices that he's a guy they've never seen before. But to be honest, if you work in a big enough place, and I've worked in a couple of huge resorts, especially a position like dishwasher, there is such a rotation of who comes and goes that you really don't pay attention when somebody you don't know shows up. It's like you just assume there was hiring that you didn't know about, and you're more likely to notice that somebody you know has stopped showing up than you are to notice a new person. Um, so he gets told, like, as he's standing there and just sort of absorbing the chit chat around him, I didn't realize that this is what he's doing, but he's basically creating his own data set to compare to whatever the next person he speaks to tells him so that he can figure out whether he's being fucking lied to, which is really smart. And I don't think I would have necessarily thought of this. And I was just impressed because this is a really good way to have like a litmus test, and they don't realize that's happening. When we are inside Moira's head later, it doesn't seem like she is aware at first that he knows anything. It's not until he seems unsurprised by something she has said that she kind of steps back and is like, oh, he may already know some of this stuff. Like, she thought she was really telling him things for the first time. And some of it she is. Um, but yeah, so he finds out that Davalos is going to be hosting uh, uh, an embassy from the virulent Warren. And he's told that Davalos is the overseer. He's in charge of the Fiery Shoals. It's been over a year now. He was promoted after House Hydra cycled a few great souls through the position, but now it's permanent. Or would be, but excuse me, excuse me. And the man tore himself free and practically ran away. So this is a moment for Scorio. I definitely appreciate that earlier on when he's thinking about who he's going to get vengeance on, for him, it's Damien, because, yeah. But feeling the way he does about Davalos, of course you would. He was part of the initial group that came and got you. It's such a shame, guys. I liked Evelyn. I just didn't want her to be a part of this, but I don't see any way around it. She has to have been. If she isn't, then she, like, and if she isn't a part of it, if this was all done and she wasn't aware of it, I don't really see how you stay with Manticore after this, but you can't leave. So she'd be in kind of an impossible position. Um, so he asks somebody where he can find Moira. At first, they're all like, "What do you want with her?" And he's just says, like, she wanted me to give her some info. And this dude is like, "Oh, okay, I guess," because she's got her little feelers. It's sort of funny because now that we know how she works, the idea that anybody would be actively looking for her is almost, it would be unnecessary for them to do this. She can just reach out mentally and find them, you know? But regardless, um, so the man is like being questioned and kind of resistant. So Scorio is using his ability and he kind of overdoes it. He just makes this guy really like panicked and freaked out. Um, Dreadblaze Damien started a Manticore training center on the island of Azurith. It was his reward for helping Autocrator Praximar ascend to controlling the consortium. Don't worry, Moira just wanted me to ask some basic questions, gauge the mood, as it were, before their departure. You've been most helpful. He took a tentative step back and then rushed away. So, Praximar had given Damien an island. The only ones Scorio knew about were the floating islands along the Golden Circuit, and Davalos had been promoted to Overseer. With his ability to increase his intelligence based on his mana consumption, he'd no doubt have run this place with the utmost efficiency if he was working off gold. It's so gross, you guys. And I had still a little bit been clinging to, like, maybe it just looks like they were all involved, but it was really only Simeon and Idriel. Like, I had a little bit of still, what if they just went off and did their own thing and it wasn't all of Manticore? And, like, I guess technically you could still make that work, but it just doesn't look likely. And I'm just saddened by it. It's just so sad. So, Scorio goes and looks for Kyrie. And I was kind of excited about this because I really enjoyed Kyrie. He was one of those characters that even though we only got to see him for a moment, I felt like I understood who he was really quickly. And he follows him down to the baths. And poor Kyrie, he thinks when Scorio joins him in the grotto that this is Moira because they've apparently been having a little affair. And just is still so relaxed and only opens one eye to look because he thinks like, oh, I'm just going to be coy. And then when he realizes it's Scorio, the dude almost shits himself. It is very bad. So then we go into Moira's interlude. I really, really liked this. When younger, she'd envisioned a sprawling network flung across the far reaches of hell, with her at its center, advising, guiding, and informing key players as to optimum strategies with which to turn the tide of war. But she'd been naive. There was no accounting for suspicion, for fear. The fact that her power could dull wits, incite rage, induce lethargy in even the greatest of warriors made them loath to trust her, no matter that she'd offered in good faith to act only in the service of the greater good. What an ignominious fall it had been from that utopia to her small, vicious empire of the mind. A limited spiderweb stretching from bastion to the iron weald, peopled by unwitting allies and gullible pawns. This is such a bummer. The idea of like having an ability that is so useful and having like a kind of plan for it, and then realizing that of course the nature of this ability makes everybody recoil from you, which I'm assuming is what happened with Simeon, but obviously I have a lot less sympathy for him. And I don't really have a lot for her either, but if she's telling the truth, and I think she is, about how she's feeling about Praximar now, I have to give a little bit of grace, just a little. Um, so she is reaching out with her mind. Somebody named Pellimer, which I don't think we've met this person. Chancellor Praximar is spending his morning meeting with prospective House Hydra recruits. There are two candidates in particular he's eager to induct, though I'm not sure why. He's lunching alone. Then this afternoon will teach his seminars with the upperclassmen. I know he's traveling into Ward 7 tonight in secrecy, but I don't know where or why. And she says, you know what I desire, and they reply, I will do my best. So the fact that she is asking about Praximar in this way did kind of have me going, huh, what is up here? And then the more ascetic and passionless the world thought her, the less they worried about her private ambitions. Moira, loyal servant of House Hydra. And I thought that that was a really interesting point. The idea of like making yourself seem so stripped down that that you are seen as just like an appendage rather than an independent person, and therefore maybe a little less threatening, or at least seemingly easier to figure out. It's a good tactic. I liked that. Um, so she feels out how some folks are like behaving or feeling right now. And this was really interesting because I didn't realize that when she dips in and out of folks' minds, they aren't aware she's there. But it seems that's the case. With Davalos, she has like accidentally brushed his hand passing him in the hallway, so he doesn't even know that she has the ability to do this. And the fact that she can just sort of be like, how's he feeling, is really that is so alarming, to know that she can test, like take his temperature, and he has no idea. He was bored. Not channeling gold, then. Tapping into his mind when he was thusly elevated was an electrifying experience. His thoughts mercurial, his nature roused, his persona overwhelming. Now he merely waited, his impatience rising, his hunger held at bay. Nothing of note, then. This was interesting. not channeling gold. The way she describes it is almost like he's stoned or something, or on coke. And is it just like tapping into his mind like when he's in the midst of a fight or when he is meditating? I feel like I'm not even fully appreciating the way that meditation works in this universe because we really have seen so little of it. I know that it's been happening, and we saw the most of it in Scorio's isolation. But in terms of like the way that it's practiced, the combat is what we have been focused most on, which makes a lot of sense. But anyway, so she reaches out to like the servants and stuff. Nothing seems amiss, and then she reaches out to Ravenna. And I was very interested here. We know her and what's going on with her. As always, she took pleasure in the young Tombspark's composure. She'd yet to catch her unawares. Such composure, such steadfast purpose. How fares our Lady Octavia? Better this morning. She visited the citadel so as to conduct business, though she was furious when she returned to the palace. I don't think she'll ever accept the taxes imposed on all Kraken trade or the oversight. Do you have a sense of when you might be able to approach her? Not yet. She alternates between public equanimity and locking herself away in her suite for hours at a time. I've made myself useful, however. She's called for me twice this week. Soon I hope to have time alone with her. So, she cuts that conversation off. I love this. Uh, Paused to exchange platitudes with Blood Baron Corvin. He styled himself as the Ruinous, and in truth his small outfit had done well, but still, Moira had little tolerance for those who chose their own monikers. That one, anytime, it's just a universal rule. I don't care what like property you are in, you try and pick your own nickname and it's just silly. Just don't do it. So she reaches out to Kyrie and feels him like, all excited, nervous, guilty, afraid. And obviously, I'm thinking at that point, well, she doesn't realize this is in relation to Scorio. But I don't think it actually is, because the level of afraid that he is when he has realized Scorio is there is a lot more profound. Um, so she changes and she's definitely heading over to fuck him. And then as she's coming, she feels him out a little bit and realizes something is wrong. And he says Scorio. And she's just like, wait, how? Wait, what? But she just goes in. And she sees this dude and is like, damn. Like there's a very much sense of like, he's like much scarier now, but I'm into it. I would definitely hit it. I would hit it a many a time, actually. And then later we have the actual moment of her being like, how do I get to fuck him? It would be wild. Like, and certainly, mostly, probably for the business. But I think it's just also actual wanting to fuck him, which I have no problem with. In his place sat a man, mightily shouldered and deep of chest, the fat flensed from his body, so there was no disguising his newfound strength. His black hair hung in a ragged, dusty mane, but beneath its fringe Scorio's blue eyes smoldered with a new inner fire. He was dark and sinister in the gloom, hard and dangerous, but it was his aura that frightened Moira. It filled the grotto like a crackling black flame, intense and powerful beyond what any tomb spark or even flame vault could manifest. And she tries to make a little crack about how they keep meeting when they're naked and it does nothing. And she realizes, like, yeah, something's definitely changed because this dude would have blushed before and this has no impact whatsoever. He's like, why shouldn't I just kill you? And she kind of wants to be like, but she can't muster it because I think she realizes there's a much bigger possibility of that happening here than she wants to admit. Um, you're in desperate need of allies and have nowhere to flee to. So this is when she kind of goes for, you're only interested in revenge. Uh, your friends are dead. He jerked back. What are you talking about? That handsome fellow who was in the pool with you that time we met, Leonis, along with Leonci and Naomi? Emberlings all, were they not? Manticore slew them. Scorio seemed to wilt, sinking back against the edge of the pool. You're lying. There, she had him off kilter. I wish that I were. Damien didn't trust them not to cause problems after your death, to not investigate, to not raise questions. Thus, he slew them the moment you departed the chasm. The official version is they were killed by fiends while meditating in the depths. They're buried, I was told, just outside the settlement. I am really, really curious about this, because if they were killed by fiends, that means, like, the idea that they're buried is the part that makes it sort of questionable. But if they were in the depths, is it possible that they could have faked their deaths? They could have known that's what was they were after and done something to make it seem like they died. There's no mention here of Jova and her friends. What does Jova make of all this? Does she realize what's happening? How deep into it is she? Like, there's just a lot of, like, there's so much possibility, and this is such a bare bones story that I do not know how much I want to, like, take her word for it, not just thinking she's lying, but that she may have been given inaccurate or incomplete information. Because, like, we had them think for sure Scorio was dead. He got thrown into a pit that should have killed him if things had gone to plan. And they didn't, and he's still alive. So it's certainly possible his friends are still alive. If they are dead, guys, I'm going to have such mixed feelings. I will have so much respect for Phil Tucker just going for it, making these friends with Scorio that I have grown to care about, and then killing them off page. It's like, it's terrible, and I'd be so mad. But I would also kind of be like, wow, he really did it. Like, you know what I mean? It's just one of those where I'm like, I want to be angry, but I also might be a little impressed. I just can't think that they are, though. It just doesn't work. Storytelling wise, I don't feel like you would do it this way. Um so yeah, she feels this, like, moment of shock when he starts to believe her and realizes he's using gold mana, and she's just like, what is going on? And then he transforms, and she is like, what's happening? Because the water actually starts to bubble because he's boiling it. You're sorry? His voice took on a demonic undertone, unworldly and terrifying. He was about to remove her head. Moira fought the urge to leap from the pool. She'd never get away in time. It wasn't my intent that they should suffer, nor you. I didn't know what the plan was, its full dimension, nor how Praximar would run it with consequences so extreme that I barely recognized the hell we now live in. So he starts to come at her, and she stops and just says, I am an enemy of Praximar's and nearly a traitor to my house, Scorio. I'm working with rebels to undo the damage that was done. I swear this upon my heart. The self-inflicted heart oath flooded the room with the stored silver mana she kept secreted in the bottom of her reservoir, sealing the words with absolute truth. The man felt the power of her words and paused. I warned Praximar of the White Queen's intentions, thought we could leverage the chaos for advantage. He never confided to me what his plan was. He left the matter in Ira's hands, who turned to Manticore. I promise you that I am aghast at what has taken place and will work with you to undo it. So this is when she starts to tell him everything that's happened. Druana's attack on the coffer failed due to a very timely intervention from House Hydra. The coffer escaped, but Captain Thorne died. Guys, I was so bummed. I really, I had to assume he was dead, but I really was rooting for him. I liked him. Druana surrendered, was taken prisoner, and executed. Can you imagine knowing that Simeon was in there the whole time? That's so fucked up, you guys. Octavia and her forces were meant to be taken by surprise, but they were ready for Hydra's assault in Bastion. Basilisk turned traitor, warning Kraken of the plan. For a month, Bastion was a battlefield, as Hydra fought basilisks and Kraken in the streets. It wasn't until Chimera was convinced to join Hydra that a tense peace took place, which was sealed by the Iron Tyrant's arrival. He was, as you can imagine, quite wroth. Praximar apologized for the interruption in shipments and explained there had been no time to appeal to the tyrant to adjudicate. All knew that treachery had taken place, but the tyrant cared only for establishing order. Kraken was broken, Basilisk driven into hiding, and none of their higher-ranked members were able to intervene in a timely manner. The tyrant respects strength, which Praximar had demonstrated. He accepted Praximar's promises that shipments would resume on time, and departed. By the time the White Queen must have heard of the situation, it was fait accompli. She could have worked her way back, I suppose, but that would have meant giving up her new commitments and battles to reassume her mantle as a ruler of the plains. I'm sure she rued Praximar's actions and the failure of her plans, but we've not heard from her. So Basilisk was removed from the council, along with the people's representative. What? Praximar was... She tried to find the right words. Kyrie came to her rescue. Brutal. Visiting retribution on the people of Bastion. Scorio went very still. He found the ringleaders of the rebellion. They weren't hiding anymore, and had them executed. Their bodies put on display. He reinstated the old policies and bolstered House Hydra guard numbers so that punitive patrols could watch the poorer wards. From what I understand, it has not been gentle. Scorio closed his eyes, lowered his chin, and shuddered. The black aura that crackled in the chamber grew so oppressive that Moira couldn't restrain sharing a worried glance with Kyrie. "The bastard," whispered Scorio. "Yes, precisely. I sought to stop him, but, well, I failed. The more I complained, the more I was sidelined. What do you care? You're House Hydra, you benefit. Praximar benefits. His visions for the Academy benefit. He's confiscated House Basilisk's share of the gold mana and given House Krakens to the Iron Tyrant. But in Deep Hell, the Blood Barons and Crimson Earls have taken note. For now, House Hydra's leaders stymie those of other houses, but one day soon, a Charnel Duke or Crimson Earl from a rival house shall find the opportunity to return and exact revenge." "The Accord of Indemnity," said Kyrie softly, "proscribes anyone above a Blood Baron from ruling Bastion directly, but that doesn't mean someone of power might not return to right the scales." "It's a perilous balancing game," said Moira softly. "Should a Basilisk Charnel Duke come to confront Praximar, it's likely that a House Hydra Crimson Earl would follow. They hesitate so as not to start an interhouse war." "Praximar has already begun one," said Scorio dully. "But everything that has happened here is of relatively low stakes. Those embroiled in Deep Hell are not affected. Even the Iron Tyrant has benefited from his increased stake. This is, for the most part, a local matter, right up until it's not. And that comeuppance is what I seek to avoid." And this is when he asks how long, and she says 2 years. Much has changed. Manticore is exalted for their role in what took place. Davalos has been made the permanent steward of the Fiery Shoals. He has increased the month's quota in a variety of ingenious ways due to how gold mana enhances his intellect. Simeon and Idriel command the celestial coffer. Evelyn operates an extraction operation at the chasm, attempting to duplicate the system in place here. So, Damien has been given command over the floating island, and this matches what he has found out. This thing with his the way that Davalos' intellect is increased when he uses gold mana. I don't remember this, guys. I'm sure it was mentioned, and I just, there's so many things that there are so many moving parts and powers and whatnot with the different characters that it's hard sometimes for me to keep everything in mind and know what to pay attention to and what's going to wind up actually being important later. But this was just a moment of like, wait, what about that? I just didn't recall this. Um, so they've grown in wealth and power. Damien has announced Manticore departs for the Iron Weald when the Celestial Coffer arrives. He intends to make his way to the Silver Unfathom, the lustrous Maria. That's as far as Dread Blazes can go. I know what you want, and I can give it to you. You have no reason to trust me, but that trust can be earned with blood. Davalos. I won't fight him, but I can help. I can make it so that he's slower, prone to confusion, to making poor decisions. But he's a dread blaze. You are... Scorio just stared at her. You'll have to face him alone, but I can tell you where he is and how to get him. If I do this, will you trust me? No. Moira smiled. A first step, then. I did like that. She doesn't take offense to this. He doesn't follow it up with a threat. It's just a simple, like, no, I will not. And her being like, yeah, that's fair. um, so she mentions about how Scorio has been fully blamed for everything, his reputation totally ruined, and that like anybody sees him involved in this and they are going to think the worst of him the way they have been. You'll need to get out of the shoals right after. I'll arrange to arrive on the scene after his death. If you trust me enough by that point, I'll show you how to get out. Scorio studied her. I can't tell if you're sincere. I guess that's what happens when you spend your life lying. Moira felt a pang of annoyance, but hid it well. Annoyance because he, right? Is that why, Moira? Because I feel like that's why, Moira. That's the thing that gets us the most annoyed a lot of the time, is when somebody is just dead fucking correct. It's just like, shut up. So, yeah. He says he's going to go for Davalos immediately, which Kyrie was not expecting. They come up with a little plan. And I like when she's like, says to Kyrie, we'll resume our meeting after this is all settled. And Kyrie's just like, yeah, okay, cool. And just stays in the water while they leave, like, please leave. Please leave me alone. So they put him in an outfit that is hooded to hide his face and is just like, we're going to have to figure out how you can restrain your aura because that shit is too much, but deal with it later. And as we jump to his POV in chapter 50, he sees what she means and the way that people react to him as he walks by. I love this. He describes it at first as if he like reeks somehow. And then is like, oh, it's like I've got a dog that I'm towing along on a chain and it's snarling at everybody. Just this instant feeling from everybody as if he is threatening. And the idea that he was washing dishes with this sort of vibe is very funny to me. I really wonder what people thought of him when he was just down in the kitchens. So he starts to think about how his friends are dead, and he gets so flipped out that Moira turns around and kind of gives him a look because his whole the energy is already threatening at a simmer, but when he starts to boil, it's apparently genuinely alarming. Um, so he has to keep it sort of tamped down a little bit. And let's see. He had surprise. That was his one true advantage. Davalos thought him 2 years dead. In that moment of horrified surprise, Scorio would strike. So this she tells him like there is a private staircase and I can read his mood. He's focusing on something else. Once I sense that there is shock because he has seen you, I'll start to fuck with his head a little bit. And when you come back down to my rooms, like we'll figure out what to do next. If I sense that he is dead but you don't arrive, I'll climb up to see if I can help. Um so he can't tell how sincere she's being. I think she is sincere. It's just very mercenary. I don't think it's. When I was in her head, there is no sense of true empathy. It's just a sense of like, I wanted to get certain things done. And this ability has made people back off so that getting those things done is harder. So I don't think that she genuinely cares about him or his people. It's just that she realizes what a fantastic tool he could be. And so she's going to do what she says initially to make sure that he gets what she is promising and so she can gain some trust from him. I think she overestimates how effective this attempt at gaining trust is going to be. But this is when Scorio comes in. These two dudes who are in this room are like, "What are you doing in here? You're not supposed to be in here." And he basically just knocks the two of them out and strides right past them without even looking at them. It's nothing. It's almost funny. Like, I feel like it could be kind of comical. It's just, he's so angry that it keeps it. There's, so, you know, in a movie, like, let's say John Wick. With John Wick, you're here for the kills. You know, the violence is what you are here for. That's the point. And so when he does a ridiculous murder with a pencil, you're just kind of like, that is rad as fuck. But here, I am actually emotionally invested in what's happening. So I can't just step back and cackle the way that I would otherwise. Because I know Scorio being this incredibly brutal, this is not truly who he is. It's the worst version of him when he is the most upset. And so it's super sad, actually, in a way, you know? Um, so he walks in and then Davalos realizes who he is. Scorio transforms. And Davalos, to his credit, despite being like caught off guard initially, does manage to defend himself pretty effectively with very little warning. Um, and he does like he's clearly been confused by Moira, and also Scorio's commands to tell him to stand still are affecting him. So all of this combined is not only making Scorio really effective, but also combined making Davalos even more confused because of the way this is. He knows something is wrong with his reaction. You know, all of this is just like coming together in his head is like, none of this is making any sense. What is going on? Um, and he punches Scorio across the face, which, like, we saw what Scorio was like back when he was getting beaten to shit by Crush, and he is not that guy anymore. So clearly Davalos intended an effect that doesn't happen because Scorio's just takes the punch and then turns back and is just like, is that it? And I'm not going to like go into a blow by blow with this because I am going to be over time very shortly. But suffice to say, Davalos starts to run, and Scorio throws a bunch of like, and this is a little bit later, but he runs and he uses a bunch of people from, I think, Hydra to interfere. And it's not until later on that he catches up with Davalos and begins to insult him to kind of try and get a rise out of him. Um, I'm going to just really briefly touch on the interference that gets run here. It's Hydra and Manticore. Yeah, here it is. So he just uses his command to flee at first. Some of them stop and take a step back, but it doesn't actually get them turning and running. We've got a bunch of different people with different cool like attacks, but I'm not going to go one by one because I'm not sure if they're all actually dead or if he just manages to set them unconscious, but I think they're dead. And either way, it I don't feel like these people are going to matter, and if they do, we can just come back to it, if it does turn out to be important. All of this comes to the point where they think they've got him like kind of gripped up in a spot. This lady is saying for them to like continue holding him in place while she does something. And the fact that he is able to break out of this is beyond their understanding. He shouldn't have been able to do that. Apparently they can tell what his like level is, that he isn't as high up as they are. So the fact that he can fight back just doesn't, it's not calculating. Um Scorio clipped them each on the back of the head as he retracted his wings, falling into a run as they collapsed behind him. Biting down a roar of fury, he sprinted down the rest of the hall, only to stagger to a stop before charging through the end doors into the cross hall. So Davalos is in his gold form. And he follows him out onto this balcony. Black columns supported a portico in whose shadowy, heavy bronze doors stood open, revealing the interior of the suite. Davalos stood within, a naked blade in hand, facing the heavy doors outside of which he'd placed his guards. Scorio smirked. For all his gold-enhanced intellect, he'd not guessed Scorio's flame vault power. So, he says, he uses his command for silence, and Scorio followed his command with a tackle, but Davalos shifted to mist, and he plunged through the man's form. He caught his balance, twisted back, and took a blade straight to the heart. Davalos had plunged it down in his golden form, two-fisted, but the angle was off. The tip skittered off Scorio's scales and caught over his right breast, plunging into the massive muscle and wedging into the shoulder joint. The pain was exquisite, but Scorio swept his talons across Davalos' face. The man misted, reappeared to hammer a punch into the side of the blade, causing the sword's tip to grind against bone. So they go back and forth with him misting, coming back, misting, coming back. And this is when he starts to call him a coward, just here to shuffle papers, that's all you're good for. He calls him a coal brain, I think, is what he says, something like that. And then, you know how I survived? The font is still down there. The original castle's font, the mechanism. It can be controlled. It can grant eternal life, which is a big fat lie, but also I love that he is planting this little seed. You know who released me? Idriel. You didn't think she really threw me down there, did you? I love it. All these little bits, like it's all bullshit, but the fact that he is just like, I'm just going to make a bunch of like wild pronouncements and who knows what you're going to believe. So he uses his command, stop, and he lifts him up. Scorio simply chased the man as he sprinted back to the door, and when he appeared again a second later, he sank his talons into the back of his head and jerked him back. Davila's feet went out from under him as he crashed onto his ass. Scorio raced back to the double bronze doors. The man didn't immediately miss. He reached up to clasp at Scorio's wrist, panting, trying to get in a deep breath to cry out. People were hammering on the closed doors. A moment later, a panel shattered as someone crashed it in. "Wait," the man cried out. "I can explain." "Sure you can," growled Scorio, and barreled him out the doors onto the balcony. "I know where your friends are," shouted Davalos, voice raw with panic. Scorio almost hesitated. But no, that was the exact right thing to say to get him to slow down, to stop. And honestly, I think Davalos was telling the truth, but I also don't want Scorio to give him an inch, so I was very conflicted here. So, Scorio leaped up as his wings emerged, three-toed feet sinking their talons into Davalos' golden shoulders. Wait, I can tell you." For a second, Davalos held on, his grip crushing, but Scorio reached down and raked his talons through the man's fingers, severing a number of them, and the dread blaze fell. You guys, he doesn't just fall. Bruh gets, very slowly and horribly burned to death. This is not a simple he sinks into lava and is no. He has this misting ability, and he's, burning in the midst of it, so he keeps coming back more injured. It's really, really horrific. And eventually, he just turns into a charred lump. And that's the end of the chapter. I never thought Scoria was going to get revenge so fucking fast. I mean, honestly, it's the least of the people that I'm worried about. Damien top of list, Idriel second, Simeon third. Evelyn, I feel like, should be higher up because she really was the one who got them. But it's just so hard for me to really turn against Evelyn. What can you do? But I am over time, so I really do have to go. But yeah, this is really satisfying, but also I'm so sad. Poor fucking Scorio. He has been dealt a really raw deal, man. Bad hand. All right. I've got to wrap it. Thank you guys so much. But also, no thank you, and I hate you. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.